And for Panzironi to explain, tonight we're going to talk about two topics that are the basis of our nutrition and metabolism. Let's go over, turn the board around, and we'll talk about proteins and amino acids.
Yes, certainly it is a very interesting topic that needs to be part of everyone's knowledge. Because precisely if we know what proteins are and what they do, we are also able to evaluate more correctly both, let's say, our nutrition, our diet, but also our metabolism. And we are also able to understand where that so-called dogmatic medicine tells us things that are very often not true.
So let's go right away and explain to our viewers what proteins are with this video.
Proteins, from the Greek protos, meaning primary, are a group of organic compounds formed from sequences of amino acids linked together by peptide bonds. Proteins represent the building blocks with which our cells construct biomechanical structures such as bones, nails, epidermis, muscles, tissues, but also multiple enzymes, hormones, toxins, antibodies, cell organelles, DNA. In the human body, according to scientists at Johns Hopkins University, there is an inventory of more than 18,000 different proteins. Proteins are built inside ribosomes, the organelles found in every cell, using amino acids and following a pattern contained in the messenger RNA chain, which are then either used within the cell or excreted into the extracellular matrix. The amino acids needed for protein production can come from the diet or from protein turnover, which begins with the breakdown of proteins in our bodies. In fact, each protein component is renewed at different times. For example, enzymes every 7 minutes, hemoglobin every 120 days, muscles every 180 days, collagen every 1,000 days.
Very good, Mr. Panzironi. So basically, proteins are like bricks with which our body builds virtually every structure.
Sure, when we imagine our body, we have to imagine it as if there is a protein structure within which we have billions of cells housing it, right? And so basically every tissue of ours, whether it's the fingernail, whether it's the skin, be bones. They are protein scaffolds and therefore have collagen fibers. But the same we find proteins inside the cells. These proteins are used to produce hormones. So absolutely they are a building block for our metabolism.
And as our video said, basically there are more than 18,000 different proteins in our body.
Yes, in the human body it's about 18,000, but do you think in nature we encounter things like billions and billions of different proteins? That is, every living thing has its own pattern of proteins. And then there is that extraordinary ability of the body that through precisely organelles and ribosomes are able to produce these proteins, and they do it basically by receiving a mold, as if it were a factory. There is a mold that comes precisely from the messenger RNA, coming from the nucleus of the cell, which controls these organelles for the production of precisely the proteins needed by the cell.
Look, Panzironi, now that we practically know that our body, our tissues, our cells practically renew themselves all the time, we understand the great importance of proteins.
Of course, because our body is a continuous repair, so we have these collagen fibers that have to be cut, replaced with new collagen, and that clearly allows us to keep our tissues in great condition.
He's basically talking about what was called protein turnover in the video.
Of course, is a relationship between the activity of ribosomes that precisely continue to produce new proteins and lysosomes instead that produce substances that go on to degrade the matrix and allow then the repair of the collagen fibers themselves. Basically, proteins do this, but there's a clear need for their building blocks, which are precisely the amino acids with which precisely the ribosomes produce the new proteins.
Very clear, Panzironi. It really seems to me like clarity in person, and the thing is we have to go and understand what these amino acids are. So I would say let's look at this tutorial.
Amino acids are the constituent units of proteins and, like letters of the alphabet, which allow the construction of countless words, they have an unlimited amino acid sequence that can allow the construction of as many proteins. Altogether, 20 different amino acids have been identified, 8 of which are defined as essential, meaning we need to take them in through the diet. Deficiency of even one of these essential amino acids reduces the proportion of the amino acid utilization for plastic purposes and increases the proportion of those that will be processed by the liver and used for energy purposes, resulting in the production of urea. This is why the BV biological value formula was created, based on our body's ability to use protein for plastic purposes. The formula is as follows. BV equals NR divided by NA multiplied by 100. That is, we determine NR, what nitrogen is introduced through the diet, divided by NA, what nitrogen is incorporated into the body, times 100. This formula shows that animal protein is used for plastic purposes from 78%, for example, of meat, to 100% of eggs, while plant proteins from 34%, for example, of potato, to 59% of rice.
Panzironi's example of the letters of the alphabet struck a chord with virtually everyone and made it perfectly clear to us that it is the sequence of these amino acids that then determines what protein will be.
Of course, we with these 20 amino acids can produce infinite amounts of protein. But also important then are the peptide bonds that allow you to bind different amino acids and give different shapes so you can get to a primary, secondary protein, tertiary or quaternary based precisely on their structure, which can be precisely a simple sequence, but also a three-dimensional form, as in the case of quaternary.
In the video, it was said that 8 essential amino acids are distinguished.
Yes, we have, of the 20 amino acids that have been discovered, 12 are those that we can produce practically by ourselves through our liver. Others, however, our body cannot produce them, so we absolutely have to take them from the diet. Otherwise, we risk being in the deficient, therefore having a percentage of, let's say, so protein transformation into new structure. So collagen, we said cells and whatnot, and therefore an excessive amount of protein that will then be transformed into glucose.
Then we saw that there is a biological formula on the value of protein that is really helpful.
Yes, this formula makes us understand that proteins are not all the same at all. Also makes us realize the scientific lie that we have unfortunately been told for too many years, namely that of nutritionists who tell us day after day that plant proteins can safely replace animal ones. Actually not so, because plant proteins are absolutely deficient in essential amino acids, so they have a utilization rate of the protein purposes considerably lower than that of animal proteins. That is why they are called noble proteins and non-noble proteins.
Look, though, can you give us a better understanding of this essential amino acid deficiency that is therefore more present in plant proteins and is a problem?
We have to imagine that our body does not have a reservoir like it does for fats or sugars, where it keeps the amino acids once they are broken down. So the body uses those that it has, and it has the amino acids that come precisely from catabolization, then from the lysosomes that produce precisely these metalloproteases that go to break up these chains, so they input a certain amount through the cell of amino acids that the body can reuse. But the WHO also tells us that we need a certain amount of new amino acids, because inside we find precisely the essential ones, and we are talking about 1 gram per kilogram body per day. And well, when we introduce foods that are not rich or balanced as animal proteins of essential amino acids, well, we risk that some of these amino acids are not used for our body, but instead are captured by the liver and converted into glucose.
Perfect. I thank our Adriano Panzironi for this column, Panzironi Explained.